All right, there we are. Hi, everyone, and welcome to our second PlanFirst Live. I'm Sean Larkin. I'm the Manager of Design Services here at PlanFirst Design. And my guest today is Nick Lico, who is my colleague. And I'll give him a chance to introduce himself a little bit later on. As I mentioned, PlanFirst specializes in architectural, interior, landscape design services, as well as interior decorating, quantity surveying, and engineering. Today, our topic is the psychology of space. So what that means is how good design shapes the way we feel. I invite all of you to add comments. You're welcome to ask any questions, and we'll try and get to everyone's questions and answer them live. If we don't get to your question, please feel free to reach out to us afterwards via our website or our Facebook page. I will put the links up at the end, but we'll do our best to get to everybody. Today's structure is going to be broken into 3 parts. The first part is going to be the key principles of our topic for the day, and I will be presenting that. After that, Nick will be talking about real life experiences that he's had and give you some insight into the real issues or challenges that one does find on site. And thirdly, once we've done that, we'll go into answering your questions and any comments that you guys may have. So a little bit about myself. As I said, my name's Sean Larkin. I'm an architect registered in South Africa. I'm fairly new to New Zealand, and I'm based in Auckland and currently working towards registering here in New Zealand. A little bit about my background. I started off as an architectural draftsperson. I did a diploma in drafting, and then I progressed to a master's degree in architecture over time. So I've been working in the industry for over 20 years, and I've worked on various projects, various typologies, anything from residential architecture, educational, commercial, industrial, sports sectors, civic buildings, and I've worked through the whole project life cycle. So everything from the client's initial vision for the project through the design, technical drawings, working with the consultants, helping engineers figure out the structure of the building, working with council, and then supervising and administering the actual construction on site. And my passion really is helping solve problems for my clients. I have a lot of residential architectural experience, and I've actually grown with a lot of my clients as their needs and their families have grown, so their houses have grown, and I've grown with them as well. So I would like to now let Nick introduce himself. Nick, over to you.
Oh, thanks, Sean. Hi, everyone. Just very quickly, studied architecture here in New Zealand, in Wellington, where the school is actually celebrating 50 years next week. And then I always wanted to work in the United States. I picked a good horse, as someone mentioned to me, in a commercial firm called Perkins Eastman Architects. That's one of the 2 largest practices now in New York City, and one of the largest global practices globally. I then decided to come back to New Zealand about 20 years ago. Equally picked another good horse at the time, Craig Moller, which had been practicing for about 30 years, whose projects have included Sky Tower in Auckland. That's effectively where I started to get interested in housing. Then I had my own commercial firm here in Wellington, and then I became associated with the parent group of PlanFirst, which includes a number of other brands, inclusive of refresh, renovations, and zones landscaping. And as someone said to me recently, they said, it is too bad you don't bet on horses, because you do seem to pick a good horse. And that's what we think PlanFirst is heading towards in its aspirations of actually being an international global leader across the brands that Sian's mentioned. And that is effectively a design fraternity that will grow to operate in the countries that the other associated businesses we already operate are in practice, which is the United States, the UK, and Australia. So Sian, why don't we head back to you, and you can run us through the presentation.
All right, great. Thank you, Nick. I'm going to add our first slide onto the screen. And as I said, today's topic is the psychology of space and how good design shapes how we feel. It's quite a broad topic, so we're just going to briefly touch on 6 of the most important points when it comes to good design. And good design really is, it varies from person to person. But if we look at society as a whole, then I think we can generalize and agree that there are certain psychological triggers that would have effects on everybody. And the question is, why design matters? Why does design matter? Have you ever walked into a room and you've either felt stressed or you have felt relaxed? This is the same room. It's just designed and decorated in 2 different ways. So you can see what a big difference the design makes to the way you feel about a room. I'll give you another example. This is a bathroom. It's dark, it's cramped, and it's kind of cluttered. This is the same bathroom, just designed nicely with enough storage space that it doesn't feel dark, dingy, and cramped. So it just sets your tone for the whole day. In this example, it is a bathroom, but the same is for other rooms as well. I don't like the term bad design, because everybody's an individual and we've all got our own taste. But again, I think we'll look at what most people consider. I like to say, instead of saying bad design, I would say questionable design, because I think if anybody walks into a room that looks like this, it does have an effect. It immediately would stress you out, and it does have a bit of an effect on mental health, dare I say it. If we look at the next slide, again, same room, just designed in a different way, different color scheme, different lighting. And it's easy to do that with thoughtful design. So the bones of the building remains the same, but the way you configure it and you dress it up is different. And that does make a big difference to people's moods. So the key elements that we're going to look at today is going to be lighting, color, spatial layout. So that spatial layout is not just spatial layout of furniture, but spatial layout of the actual building itself. Materials and textures, furniture and scale, and softscape. Let's have a look at this slide. So I would say this is pretty poor lighting. It's quite dark and gloomy, and if you were to enter a room like this, I think most people would feel quite depressed and anxious. Whereas you take, again, exactly the same room with good lighting, and immediately you've got all that natural light coming in. It just energizes you, and it gives you a much more positive feel. I'll go back so that you guys can just have a look again. Quite dark and dingy. Much, much better. Right, so then we're going to go on to artificial lighting actually is also important. That creates more, obviously, mood at night. Soft, warm lights give quite a cozy and inviting feel, whereas if you had bright overhead lights, it would not give you that same atmosphere. So depending on where you're working in the house, lighting is different in different areas of the house. Moving along to color. Color definitely does affect one's emotions. If you look at reds, oranges, yellows, it gives you quite an energetic feel. It's very energizing. Whereas cooler tones are more calming, relaxing, and serene. You can use accent colors in any room. You can use it through pillows, cushions, rugs, artwork. So you can easily change the mood of a room without having to repaint or change the furniture. Moving along to spatial layout. Although compartmentalized layouts in a house do give you privacy, and some people do like to have privacy in certain areas, it does block conversation. Again, we'll take the same room and we'll make an open plan, and it just encourages connection and social interaction between people. Again, it depends on person to person how we all live, but generally this would be a better flow just to encourage that socializing. One's also got to think about how people move around the room. What do they see first? How do they interact with the room, the furniture, the layout? You can see here in this image, the focal point is definitely the exterior, which we'll talk about a little bit later in the softscape, but it's a great idea to bring that outside into the house as well. Natural materials, definitely bringing natural materials into the inside grounds you. So if you use any natural material like stone, wood, it immediately grounds you and makes you feel relaxed. You've also got soft textures that you can bring in through cushions, throws, and rugs. And it gives you a much more welcoming and lived-in feel, as opposed to having stark white, modern furniture. Curved lines also gives you a much softer experience when you're using that space. Looking at furniture specifically, be very careful not to put oversized furniture into a space, not to pack too much furniture into a space. Again, the same room, just a little bit more thoughtfully designed. If you have got issues like a ceiling that's a little bit too low, try and use vertical elements, like you'll see that bookcase that we've got in that image. It just draws your line more to a vertical. And also have a look, and normally in a space, what you would want to do is have one anchor element. So think about what you want people to see first. Would it be a piece of furniture? Would it be a plant, a view? So that is something you must think about in the space as well. So don't give everything equal importance. Moving along to our softscapes, I'm just going back to the picture that we saw earlier. This is the lounge with the blues that gives you that calming effect. Have a look at the difference it makes when you bring softscape in the form of a pot plant and just connecting to the outdoors. It makes a massive difference when you bring that inside, the outside in. Just that connection to nature is a stress release. And it just does give you that calming effect. And you can do that quite comfortably also through courtyards, which is my personal favorite. They allow a lot of natural light to come in, lots of airflow, and you have that connection with nature, which also helps to soften harsh architectural lines. A couple of practical tips. One of the important ones is try and declutter to reduce stress. and improve your mental clarity. Secondly, use light and color strategically for mood and energy. So decide what kind of mood you want in a specific space in your house, and then one works according to that. Incorporate those natural elements just to ground you and have a feeling of relaxation. And consider the scale of furniture. Before you actually buy the furniture, make sure that it is going to fit into your space, and consider that there's going to be enough space around the furniture to actually walk around. Nick, I think I'm going to hand over to you, but before I do that, if any of you want to pop questions and comments, remember, feel free to do so. But Nick, over to you. I'm going to take my presentation off, and you can then just add your presentation to the stage. Nick, I think your mic is off.
I'm sorry, you're right. I beg your pardon. There we go. Right.
I can hear you.
Okay. Is that presenting? No?
Not yet.
Sorry, I'll get that up.
Would you like me to add it to the stage, and then I'll just flick through when you're ready?
Let me just give me one last try at it. Sorry about this. Yeah, Sean, it might not be a bad idea.
All right. So you just tell me when you're ready for the next slide.
Okay. Awesome. Thanks very much, Sean. It's an interesting topic to be talking about psychology. I had a very a comment that someone once made about me that I felt completely flattered, where they said, "Do you know what you are as an architect?" They said, "You're a lawyer that draws." And I've actually used that. I've always remembered it. I've used that analogy a lot. I don't think anyone's ever asked me to create a presentation on the psychology of architecture. So perhaps I'll add that profession to my skill set next as well. The word that comes to mind for me when we talk about psychology is happy. And I wanted to start with this slide, in that I think a lot of people in the industry, actually inclusive of real estate agents, understand effectively how to illustrate happiness in their imagery. This is a photo of a basement we renovated, and the reason I just wanted to start with this is if you could actually abstract this room excuse me, to a generic room, it's effectively three walls that are basically painted white. This is a basement we renovated, and what makes this a strong psychological happy space is effectively the way that the occupant had a vision in terms of occupying this room. This is a family that has a house upstairs, and this musical equipment is effectively the dad's equipment. I think his family thought he was quite mad, and they entertained this idea that he would end up going and inhabiting this subfloor as a basement. So this was a completely unexcavated space. Some of the humor in the project is when the project was finished and they actually saw how he occupied it, all of a sudden everyone wanted part of this room instead of actually just being upstairs in the house. But I've always really liked this photo because I think as far as architecture goes, and I'm going to show a lot of photos to this effect, this is a positive space in terms of how the owner decided to actually occupy the room. Sean, I'm sorry about the start there, but I can actually flick through them now. Thanks for sharing that. This is a kitchen, a very entry level budget project. You could probably say that is this a person that maybe likes to eat fruit? What we liked about this kitchen was their use of colour. It was just absolutely fantastic, and there's a lot more colour in the kitchen. But I thought it was interesting how even when we went in to photograph it, that actually it wasn't just the architecture. It actually transpired through to the way that they actually occupied their kitchen benchtop. This is a this is a hotel that I worked on in the 1990s in New York City. One of the things when I was studying, and this is why I wanted to effectively work on commercial buildings early in my career, is it had crossed my mind that people actually have different experiences in buildings, and no one ever has the same memory of a space. A hotel is a really good example of that. No different to any other public institution, be it hospitals, schools. And so this particular hotel, this is this hotel lobby that we're seeing here. You could look it up online and see endless photographs of quite extraordinary celebrations where people have held, balls and celebrations at scale of all sorts of magnitudes, and creating a really great space as an architect it's so rewarding, and this is at one end of the spectrum. I mean, the memories people create in an environment like this, it's no different to the musician's house that I showed. He's getting an equally great outcome. And that's a factor that we really care a lot about in our projects. I'm just going to make a really quick commentary on aesthetic. As Sean, as you mentioned, that it's aesthetic is a key component in our modern day and age of architecture. And what I mean by that is that, and we're a practice that very much caters to people's diversity of aesthetic. When I look at this project, this is one of the ones we're very proud of. This is actually quite a historic job for us now. It's almost about 10 years old. This is our kind of go-to project when we get inquiries, as we have, and built these projects from the likes of embassies in Wellington, where they're looking perhaps for a more classic, regal look. This homeowner, and this is why we're showing these images, very happy to effectively showcase their home and have international embassies come through. Interesting what drives people in different manners. I was thinking about this slide before the presentation, and I know that this owner won't give me a hard time for saying this. There is an expectation on this project that it does look expensive, and they probably wouldn't hit me for saying it is expensive. All architecture has to be, but effectively that is part. They're in a location that is representative of this kind of standard of home, and sometimes not always, that could be part of the brief. We do much more modern homes. Again, that's an aesthetic difference that a customer requested, and just a third version on that. And what I've learned in 30 years of being an architect, and I'm very comfortable with that, with this condition now after 30 years of practice, is we're a service provider who, no different to other industries, for example, be that cars or garments, we have a responsibility and an obligation to effectively provide an outcome on an aesthetic basis that is reflective of what the customer wants. I just wanted to talk about one other aspect in terms of the psychology, and it has to do a little bit with. Now I'm going to change the gear and make it, about modesty and how to people feel in terms of. It's a little bit to do with apartments. This is something that I learned when I lived in New York City, and this is a slide. This is not actually the slide from where I lived, but I had an apartment that was a very modest apartment in Manhattan, and it looked out across the road to the apartment across the road. And I remember when we were all concerned about Y2K, it was New Year's Eve. They're doing the ball drop in New York, for a lot of you who will know that. I think I was going to a party around 11 o'clock. And I'm in my apartment at 7 p.m. and it's dark because it's the Northern Hemisphere. And I'm looking across the road, and there was a man in his apartment sitting there eating potato chips, watching TV. And in terms of architecture, I thought that was really compelling. That it actually felt quite reassured, that I actually was connected to the city, and not everybody was out there, having to do this extraordinary night. There was someone that was very comfortable. And you're wondering, why am I mentioning that? Because when I show the next slide, this is an apartment in Wellington. And this is a whole other topic, Sean, for another day, to do with compliance and legislation. I just don't. I don't want to be too critical. I can't believe that our building code, comparatively, this is a bedroom that the only source of natural light are these concrete blocks, and that basically faces out to an exterior corridor, which is common to all the apartments in that building. And I'll just go back to that slide I showed. Awesome little New York City apartment with an outlook. And that I don't believe is actually even meeting minimum standards in terms of humanity. That surely has an impact in terms of the psychology of its resident. The reason I'm familiar with a tenancy like this is one of the three companies we operate, which is On-Call Maintenance. We had a project where there was a water leak and we had to renovate 6 apartments. And I was just astonished that we're actually allowed to build compliantly residencies like this. I think there's an issue in that, but that's a bigger topic. And just moving on, in terms of how people actually, just 2 last slides. This is a project that we currently have in design. A little misleading, this image, because we've done this perspective from a bird's eye view, meaning it's actually from a level 1 floor up. You wouldn't actually get to look into this building as strongly as this. But again, what I'm trying to show in this is that, and there's a slide that I missed that I wanted to show, which was Santorini in Greece, that a lot of people will know. And people absolutely love Santorini. They love the environment. If they actually stop and think psychologically, what do they like about it? I think it's actually the connection that people have with each other. And then here's an image looking out from this project that we have. And that's why I wanted to show you the apartment. It's not necessary that everybody has this kind of grand view in their lifestyle. It's nice if it can be done. And that's why I come back to this slide as a finishing slide. This has a side view to nature, but it's effectively how the occupant decided to fit out the space. I just love this photo, and the architecture about it is effectively 3 white jibbed walls and a jibbed ceiling. It's remarkable. It's what a person sometimes makes of the space. A lot of questions have come through. How do you want to handle those, Sean?
I will get to the questions in a minute.
Sure.
I'm going to remove that. I just want to add on the back of the slides that you showed about that apartment in Wellington with the glass blocks. In my opinion, I understand that privacy is important to people, but let every occupant decide how he wants to deal with his privacy. You can just as easily put blinds in, put curtains in, but at least you've got the choice. Whereas with the glass blocks, you don't have the choice. You're stuck with that, and you don't have that connection to the outside world. That's even right. If you do have very thin curtains, sheer curtains, you can still see the outside. So you've still got that psychological connection to the outside. Whereas with the glass blocks, you don't. You're isolated in that room by yourself. And that's got a great psychological impact on people.
Yes. Yeah, completely agree.
All right, let's have a look at some of the questions that have come through. The first one is saying, how should designers, in fact, let me pull this onto the screen. How should designers think differently about mental health when creating public or work environments? For me, it's all about connection with other people, be it people in the office or be it people outside of the office, but you've got some form of glass that you can see through that can connect you. I don't believe in sitting in little cubicles with no connection to the outside world or to other people and isolating yourself. So I think for me personally, that should be important, and also have breakout spaces so that, whoever's working in the office for that day can sit and have a cup of coffee together and have a quick 5-minute chat. How was your weekend, etc., just so that you keep that rapport going with the people that you work with.
Great. Can I just add a quick comment to that? Probably when I had about 10 of my 30 years worth of current work experience, a friend of mine approached me and they wanted to build a weekend house. And at that stage, I didn't have a building company, and I was also doing commercial work. So I said to them that I think they would get better service elsewhere. They went and built in the countryside a proprietary home that was very affordable. And the reason I mention it is I went to their house and stayed one weekend. This is about 20 years ago. None of us were looking at the doors and going, it's not an architectural standard of sliding or bifold doors. It was exactly what you said. What was happening actually at the place. And that doesn't mean that architecture doesn't matter. And that's why we, like you're saying, Sean, why I think both of us are quite put out by the glass blocks as a wall. But architecture, celebrates, and especially residentially, because that's a big part of what we're here to talk about. There's budgets and results that with care that actually cater to everyone. I'm surprised how much over recent years I've become more interested in cars, and it's actually for that purpose that I'm always really curious to see, what's the most affordable car you can buy, and what is it that it offers, and then go to the complete opposite end of the spectrum. And of course, that person who's buying the $20,000 car is really excited, and they're getting a really good outcome for that budget. It's really awesome to deliver architecture on that principle?
Well, I think if you're going to be designing anything, be it a huge luxurious house or a small tiny home, the amount of thought that goes into the design should be similar. I don't
Correct.
think one should design just a quick, slapstick design just because it's a tiny or a small house. I think, you should put 100% design effort into each project.
Although I agree that we're both architects, and that's something we have in common, and I think it's a strong part of this forum is that architecture and its wider associates should be accessible, and that's what we promote here via PlanFirst, that everybody should have an architectural experience as part of their renovations or new build or landscape project.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. The next question that we have, I'll pull that up as well. Why does bringing natural elements like plants, views, or textures have such a strong emotional impact? I would say because it grounds you immediately. Natural textures does ground you. Any link to views normally got some form of softscape greenery linked to it. Nick, what's your view on that?
Well, I think you've answered that really well. Is it okay if I head on to the next question?
Sure.
I've just been reading it as you're commenting it, which is how are designers rethinking space to better nurture our mental and emotional health? And I think that was partly what I was endeavoring to comment on there. Having lived in Manhattan in a small apartment, the quality of that apartment was so constructive. Even what I just mentioned about how facing outwards across the road, and actually, I never once met anyone that lived in that building across the road from me. But by the fact that we were all on display, it kind of gave you this kind of grounding. And I think that's why it's interesting that I'm using examples like New York City that a lot of people know, and then actually go to a historic town like Santorini. You think about people, how often they go to places like Italy and Greece and Europe, and it's interesting for them to stop and go, what do we actually like about this? In fact, because
I think if you look at Santorini's architecture, the houses don't have particularly big window openings. I think it's because everybody spends their time outside. They're very
agreed.
They're either on the beach or they're in a restaurant or they're socializing together. So really the home is just for sleeping.
Oh, you're so right. And it's a much bigger topic that we can't cover in this session, but I was really intrigued when we did that maintenance repair project in Wellington across those 6 apartments with the glass blocks to find out who in fact were the residents. Every one of those apartments was a lease. There was no owner occupation. And so they are all investments with the intention of actually then obviously having a profit. And then it was interesting to see who actually resided and rented them. A number of the tenants weren't even Wellington residents. It's exactly what you're saying. They were in industries like medical professions where they actually had their home base somewhere else. And they were literally using it almost as motel accommodation to basically reside.
Yeah, so it probably didn't matter much to them because they just slept there.
It didn't matter to them. And this is why this is a whole separate topic. The difference with Santorini is you're talking about almost, as you say, kind of a medieval condition where they're actually permanent residents. We're talking about an urban condition where those residents are going to work and then they're actually displacing themselves elsewhere. They're not actually utilizing their urban environment. that's a separate topic, but on a psychological basis, we could talk about that on an urban level and go, yeah, that has an impact.
Yes. Let's have a look at the next question. I think let's take this one. How does the relationship between our indoor and outdoor spaces affect the way we feel? And what design choices help create that sense of flow and well-being? Nick, would you like to start off?
Excellent questions. I'm just going to be very brief on this because I know you'll have a lot to comment on. I'm not to come back to the Santorini thing, but there's an example where it's actually not the relationship between the house and the courtyard. It's actually the relationship between the house and the public domain. And interesting how I even mentioned my own apartment with the outlook. This is a question, I think, probably very much directed to that fact that if we then actually focus more on the way we live in New Zealand, common to Australia, again, the US and the UK, undoubtedly. The comment I'll just make very quickly on this is that people's expectations or homeowners' expectations nowadays, and we alluded to this on last week's presentation, they have a very strong relationship between their outdoor living and their indoor living. And that generally is to the back part of their property. And so, they're socializing ultimately with family and friends in that context. If we just make a comparison with New Zealand houses from 100 years ago, when we look at Victorian homes, interesting just to consider that the expectation then was that you come through a very Victorian principle. You come in from the front door, and generally that led to 2 rooms, one on the left, one on the right. One of them is the master bedroom. The other one is what they called at the time the public parlour. And that's why I say it's a Victorian concept. But interesting how that's changed over 100 years.
Yes.
Your guests effectively were restricted to a living space on entry of the house. The back part of the house, and this is why we are a very busy practice in that domain, is that there are still so many houses that have very, very small, unrenovated original kitchen areas, and they don't have open plan living. And then the backyard ultimately is just is a residual space. So that's really changed.
So would you say that we've actually gone from living to the front of the house to actually living to the back of the house? So we've actually switched it.
Completely. And as a company that's effectively very focused, we do new builds as well, but because we're predominantly renovation experts, that's just astonishing. That's major changes in houses.
Do you get a lot of inquiries where people want to convert their traditional compartmentalized spaces into open plan?
Plenty.
So that is definitely something trendy that people are looking at.
Yeah, they like the character of their homes. It's very, very difficult in a presentation like this to illustrate it, but the project I showed very early with the character kitchen, that was a major upheaval in that home. People don't call us and go, I just want to replace the kitchen, it's tired. Well, actually, that's not true. We do that work. But in a lot of the architectural projects, there's fundamentally planning issues that need to be addressed to suit modern living.
All right, let's have a look at the next question. Let me put it up on the screen. What are some simple ways to design a stronger emotional connection between the inside of our homes and the outdoor environment? Definitely windows. That would be my number one. And it's easy to knock a window in. There's not too much structural work that goes into that, obviously depending on the size of the window. But getting back to, we talking about Santorini now, you often see photos of the two old men sitting on their chairs outside their front door.
Interesting.
And I think the reason that happens is because humans are social creatures and they want to be part of the community and greet everybody that comes up and down the street and have that sense of connection with their neighbors.
Correct. Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, and then it sounds absurd until you think it through what you said about let's put a window that relates the house to the backyard. But that's what you're saying. These Victorian homes, it wasn't a consideration for them. They entertained in the front parlor.
Yes.
Things have changed, and I like what you just said about the two. Did I hear this right? Did you actually say two old men?
Yes.
Good. That's what I'm sure. Yeah, I don't get in trouble for that. You're quite right. I think that's why even again a city like New York City, we're all familiar, whether people have been there or not, with the front stoop where people sit on the steps. They're actually connected. In New Zealand, whether it's a suburban or an urban condition, one of our big typologies seems to be, Sean, as you're saying, this connection between our homes and our private outdoor living space. That is obviously the most common condition, and people are entertaining on that principle. You can see how we could talk about this so wide spanning there for so long that we don't tend to use our front yards, in a constructive manner.
Yeah,
and that's not a criticism; it just is what it is.
Well, entertaining's just become a lot more informal. And I think in the past, the kitchen was a place that wasn't really open to guests. It was something where the meal got prepared, but everybody sat in the formal dining room or the lounge, and then the guests went home. But it's very different now. So when your guests arrive, everybody can still socialize in the kitchen. You're still busy preparing the meal. Everybody's sitting around the same, island, having a chat, and that's just become the way that we live.
Do you know one thing, again, as you see, because it's somewhere I lived for quite a while, I reference New York City so much. Even now when I look at modern architecture and apartments in New York, I'm really curious by this fact. It's interesting how ideologies sometimes don't change. They generally design apartments that the kitchen is a separate space, and so is often the dining room. They don't actually do open plan living. In New Zealand, when we design and build apartments, they often reflect the same layout as we do for houses that have outdoor space. In New York City, apartments are often constructed with that same separation, whether they're affordable or expensive apartments. Yeah, I won't comment too much further on that, but it is intriguing how people's expectations can vary, even in westernized locations.
Nick, on that note, if you had two apartments and they were identical apartments, but one had a balcony and one didn't, 9 times out of 10, the one with a balcony would be the more popular choice for people. And the reason being, because they've got that connection to the outside. They can open the door, they can stand on their balcony, breathe the fresh air. And that's just human nature.
That's right. And it's interesting how we've spoken from everything from the glass blocks. I was really glad that you commented on that you equally felt, I think that's both of us being architects. And that's what we're saying, that, we don't just bring these aesthetic values to customers, but both of us feel, I think, I'm glad that you independently felt quite troubled by that.
And
I think leads on, as you say, to windows and balconies. As long as it's constructive, it's good.
Yeah. The glass blocks were used a lot in sort of civic buildings and commercial buildings quite some years ago. I haven't seen glass blocks being used for a long time. And I think it could be for that exact reason, that they're just too impersonal.
I completely agree.
So I don't even know if they still manufacture them, but maybe they do.
They do, and that's not that old an apartment building, the one I used as an example. The fact that the legislation allows it, and that's a topic for another day. But I think the planning rules are. I don't believe they should allow it. It lets the developers effectively create spaces which, to just refocus on the topic of the presentation, when you say about the psychology of space, architecture, as you say, fundamentally is not an elitist condition. It's effectively a human condition.
No, I agree with you 100%. Just a couple of other questions that I have here. Does color placement matter as much as color choice? And I would say yes to that. I'm just thinking accent walls, for instance. I see you've got a lovely accent wall behind you there. So you wouldn't want to necessarily paint all 4 walls and the ceiling that same color. I hope you haven't got that all as one color, Nick.
I'm just looking around, the 3 walls of the same wallpaper. But another day, I might start moving my camera to the 4th side. I'm actually working from my home today, and I'm actually in the dining room. If I could turn the camera, I'm pointing towards, guess what, the backyard.
So you've got to connect to the outside.
Yeah, I've got 3 walls like this, but then I've got, like you just said,
yes.
a very, very positive outlook. So it can handle the dark walls.
I think it depends very much on the look and feel that you want in the room.
Yes.
A dining room can get away with it because it is a very specific function.
Exactly.
So you're only going to sit in the dining room when you're going to have a meal.
That's right. Yes, good fun.
Yes. Nick, anything else you would like to add before we wrap up?
No, thanks for inviting me along. I hope I contributed something positive to you. It was a good chat.
You always do.
Yeah.
I'm just going to end off. I'm just going to go back to the slide so that I can put... before I do that, the topic for next week, we're going to be discussing smart floor plans and how to avoid wasted space. So make sure you guys get notifications for that and don't miss out on that, because it is a very interesting topic. And for those of you whose questions we didn't get to, feel free to reach out. You can contact us via our website or on our 0800 number, our Facebook page, or our Instagram. And we look forward to seeing everyone again on Wednesday next week. Thank you, Nick, for joining us.
Thanks, Sean.
And you enjoy your week.
Yeah, take care.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.